So you're the founder of Australia's #1 performance marketing agency, Megaphone. What is, from an agency perspective, one actionable thing that you would advise someone to do when starting or running their own digital marketing campaigns?
I mean, there's so much that I could say. Yeah, I think like one thing is the research component is really important. So there's so many different tools now where you can kind of analyze what competitors are doing, look at the volume of ads, looking at what they've been running for a long time, try to kind of figure out what's working for other people. And then that's a really good starting place to start any kind of campaign, is reverse engineer what someone's already spent, millions of dollars trying to solve, take those best lessons and then start there and then start experimenting from that baseline.
Where do you think most people go wrong?
I guess like there's different rungs for different levels of where they're at. Like earlier companies maybe haven't thought enough about product market fit or differentiation in the marketplace. And so they have like a Me Too product with a worse website, worse ad budget, worse marketing budget, trying to compete with something that's already relatively established. And that just makes it challenging. If you've found traction and you're going well, a big thing with digital marketing was like the volume of creative testing, where people don't truly understand the amount of experiments and tests that you need to create. I launched an e-commerce company called Sylvie, which is like this skincare pillowcase. It's really good for your skin. And we did a ton of research to figure out that was a product that we wanted to launch. And then once we launched it, we were testing 100 to 150 ads per month. And we're only a team of me, my co-founder, and one other in person. And then we'll split testing the website about 5 or 6 times a month as well, like relatively differentiated A/B tests. And by doing that volume of testing, we started to just learn more about what was working. We always have fresh creatives that are working well. So I'd say like, and that next level of company, that often is something that people don't truly understand, is like the volume of testing. And also, how do you source good ideas for testing? How do you build a testing framework that's going to scale, that like is going to make sense for the business?
Do you think that's due to just a lazy founder, or is that something that they haven't seen it done properly, so they don't have an experience in order to double click or continue to expand upon?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it's a lazy founder. I would say, I think people underestimate the volume of creative testing that you just need to do. If like, for example, paid social is going to be a core of your strategy, or just in digital marketing in general, where I think people expect like, hey, like, I spent a ton of time in this ad. It's awesome. Like I got this really good, editor that made this thing. And I look at it and I go, it's not that good, firstly. And secondly, like, what else you got? Like what was the research? Like, do you have hundreds of hours of research that you've done to like figure out like the 1,000 best performing ads? And if you like researched the first 3 seconds of everything and looked at the hook rates and, what analysis have you done to figure out like what are the strategies that you want to run, as opposed to you just had a good vibe about this one or two concepts and you put it together. And so, yeah, I think it's just, I think more and more sophisticated brands are understanding this. And if you go into their like ad library on Facebook, you can see that they're just running hundreds and hundreds of ads. But I think that this just works across all forms of marketing. If you're running it like an email outbound campaign, how many subject lines are you split testing? How many different ways are you scraping intent to like trigger an email sequence? If you're doing like driving traffic to a website, how many different variations of the website, how many different ebooks, different email funnels are you split testing? And just the more that you can look at your entire funnel and figure out where are opportunities to kind of optimize and keep experimenting to improve that component of the campaign, the more it's going to improve.
Is that something that more is always better?
I mean, technically it is, but it's also like a resource allocation game where if you're hitting your target market and the cost per clicks are 10 cents and that good is $1 and you're already 10x better than average, then maybe you could shave it down to 9 cents with enough variation. But at a certain point, it just makes more sense to like work on the next thing. Maybe it's launching the new product. Maybe it is, part of being an owner is like time and capital allocation. So at a certain point, more can become less if you're poorly allocating time and resources. Yeah.
Something you talked about was how to source the creative ideas. What did that process look like for you? Because to be able to pull that quantity of creative ideas regularly out, there has to be some system and process, and also knowing you and how you operate with systems and processes for all of your life. What did that look like in order to be creative on demand?
Yeah, I'm reflecting because it's been a couple of years since we were running that process. But I think for one, we would just, as a team, any creatives that would come through would just put them into this kind of folder. And then there's a bunch of tools. There's things like, I forget what it's called, like Rocket Reach or something like that. Not Rocket Reach, but like Rocket Growth, Charm.io. There's something called Pathmatics. All these things you can just look at different ad creatives from brands. Look at the thing that you can get from Facebook, page transparency. You click about page transparency, you know about that area of the page. You can see all of the ads that are active, but you can't figure out the volume of spend on every ad. But then there's other tools that will predict the amount of ad. They have like dummy profiles that just count how many times those ads come up, and they're building their own data set. And that's much more important because I want to know what are the ads that they're scaling this month. And so we can go through those tools, just pull together a ton of ideas. And then we put together like a sprint framework where we go, okay, how complex is this idea to like pull off? Do we need like a video shoot or a photo shoot? Do we need animators and things like that? Or do we already have the assets that we can repurpose? How likely is this to work? How on brand is this? And we kind of score it, and then we just determine, okay, what are the ads that we want to create? The other thing is also, once we create one creative, we might chop up the front of the ad, and because like the hook rate is really important, so we want to get people, for example, with a video, to watch more than 3 seconds. So if we think we've got a really good ad, but the hook rate is low, then we'll just keep spinning that. And sometimes we'll get an ad that's performing really well, and then we'll figure out, okay, can we shorten it? Can we lengthen it? Can we add in more call to actions in it? So that's another way to just keep more variations as well.
So you take one almost body creative and then roll an infinite amount of hooks on the front end of it.
Totally. Yeah.
So you sit on both sides here, the founder side as well as the marketing side. At what point do you see a founder should be turning over their marketing to an agency or bringing that back in-house?
I think one thing is like, where are you, what are you most drawn to as a founder, and what is like the thing that's going to make you succeed as a company? So if you are a supplement company, it's hard to differentiate your product unless like you've innovated some new supplement, you've got IP, and you're the only person that can sell it. But for the most part, supplements are like somewhat Me Too products with just varying formulations. And so marketing becomes a massive component of trust for the brand. And so if you're a supplement founder, but you are outsourcing all of your marketing, it's going to be a challenging company to build because that is the core competency of what's going to actually build the company. Whereas if you're building, let's say Tesla as an example, you've got like this super innovative car, or they're doing like the Optimus robots or whatever. It's like you can go so hard on product because the product is so good and the price is going to be so competitive that it'll market itself. So I think like you need to understand your competitive advantage as a company and try to understand what are the things that you should never outsource. Like if you're building Optimus, you shouldn't outsource the product to like an engineering company, right? And that has to be a core competency of your company. It's the same thing with marketing, where it's like you need to understand, is this something that we need a moderate understanding of and we can give it to an expert and let them run with it while we double down on product, or is this core to the business and we need to actually bring this our internally, and then you just resources and consultants to like upskill the internal team.
So to summarize, your thought process on that is know what the core competency is of the business, and then outsource everything else.
Essentially, or never outsource the core competency. Whether or not you will outsource everything else is to be determined. But if it's like core to the business, then it's too risky to outsource that component. But yeah.
How did you navigate when you were with Megaphone? How did you navigate the rapidly changing landscape? Because digital marketing changes so quickly. There's always the next thing, the next creative, the next idea, the next funnel. How did you continually, was that just a test and iterate thing and it was a continual process? Or did you have a R&D process that allowed you to continue to kind of like spray the marketplace?
So in terms of like, I mean, there's one component is like funneling in knowledge. And so the way that I thought about that is essentially I just wanted to do every single course that felt relevant on digital marketing. So, you know, I let's say did 50 to 100 courses, but our senior leadership, that was part of a requirement of them where like every 6 to 8 weeks they had to do a new course, summarize findings, figure out if there's like 1 or 2% new ideas that we could bring in that we experiment with. And so another thing is communities. So building a community of who I think are the best marketers in the world. So after listening to a bunch of podcasts, you know, I came across this guy from Lithuania, and his name's Devidas, and he's just ridiculously good marketer, like ridiculously smart guy. And so reached out to him, we became friends, you know, we'd always jam on different things and different problems. But that was just like another way where you're just trying to figure out, okay, who are the smartest people that you're coming across around the world? What's working for them? And then similar to like the sprint framework, like would think about, there's like big experiments and small experiments. Like a big experiment might be, we want to build an organic TikTok component to Megaphone. That might be like a 6 to 12 month project because, you know, we need to build the leadership, infrastructure, everything like that. And so for a big bet like that, we try to limit them to like 1 per year where we're kind of like adding that much complexity, and you're going to need some of your smart strategic people working to solve that. But for smaller things like testing a new tool or things like that, we would just, you know, hit up a client and say, hey, we've heard this is working for other people. Do you want to test this month? You know, a lot of clients are down. They like the idea that we were just testing different things. And so we'd have clients that liked experimental campaigns and we'd just run it through them. And if it works, we'd slowly roll it out. And if not, then we'd dial it back. But maybe we'd test it with a few clients.
It's interesting. And I could see there'd be a lot of people who are interested in always being on the precipice of what's next. So always wanting to try something new. Other than continued education and continued education and community, are there any other hacks or tips or things that you do to surround yourself with people that will help elevate that? Or from a system perspective, is there anything that you do that is like, here is my systemized approach to continuing to expand? I
mean, there's communities that like look at a lot of courses online. And so being in those communities is helpful just to kind of vet courses. In terms of like sourcing those types of people, there's like business masterminds and conferences and things like that. And I think it's important to like go to those in your industry and figure out who are like the smartest people. You know, I have like a CRM of all my connections and I've ranked them based on different criteria. That helps me like keep in touch with my my contacts so I can build the relationships. I host my own events as well. So in Melbourne, I was hosting like entrepreneur getaways and things like that. In LA, I put on different events. You know, we've talked about YouTube. I was interested in YouTube, particularly last year. So I ran a YouTube mastermind and we had, you know, a series of people that had 10 million subscribers, 5 million subscribers. I had who I think is the best YouTube expert on the planet, or one of the, I consumed a lot of his content from YouTube. He came down to the event. And so instead of paying for the event or trying to pay, like some of these people charge thousands of dollars per hour, instead of trying to like, you know, get consulting with them, build a relationship with them, add value to them, connect them to people. And that's a strong way to build that kind of community of people that are solving similar problems to you.
Did you have a specific ask of them when you brought them in, or was it more of, I'm creating a community of all these like-minded individuals that you can connect with?
That's it. And so me and a friend paid for the event. And so, and then they just had to fly down, but accommodation, food, everything, and, you know, curation of a really good guest list was that all done, structure, staff. All they had to do was just rock up. And so, you know, that YouTube educator that I was talking about, he flew in from Dubai to come to the event, you know, And it's surprising, but a lot of these people hadn't, like they knew of each other. They maybe had DM before, maybe they had a phone call. They had never met in person, and we were taking initiative of actually getting them all in a room together. And so that was valuable for them to be there.
That's something that I've noticed, not necessarily in the marketing or other industries, but specifically within crypto. And I'm not very big in crypto, but a mutual of ours, Ben Lakoff, is. And he's at a different conference, event, or something every single week in a different country.
Yeah.
And it's all the same, like, biggest names in the industry, but they all build relationships because they're this like decentralized, let's hop around and connect with each other around the world. But I think that's personally, I think that's a lesson that we could all take better. And you're really, really good at hosting events and making connections to people in the place that you're in physically. But to be able to do that on a larger scale is something that invaluable too.
Yeah. No, I think it's a super valuable thing. I probably should do it more than I currently do, because like whenever I do it, it's awesome. I'll probably try to pull off another big one next year. So, but yeah, they can take a bit of work, but it's always worth it.
Yeah. Talk to me about the CRM a little bit. What are the fields you score people off of? What does the cadence of the follow-up look like? How do you determine that? And what does that process moving forward look like?
Essentially, it's an Airtable. It has the frequency in which I want to see them, based on where we're at in our relationship. And every now and then I'll update it just to say, like, let's say once a month or once every 2 months, I'll go in and just say, have I seen people? But let's say it says I want to speak to someone annually, and then it'll have my last contact, and then there'll be another tab that will say how many days am I overdue. So let's say I saw him yesterday, so I've got 365 days. But if it's been a year and a half, it'll say, hey, you're 6 months overdue to speak to this person. And then I can rank them, and it'll just kind of remind me on a every month or two cadence to kind of look in and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that person. I should reach out to them, jump on a call. So that on a high level, then I've like tagged them based on, are they person that I potentially want to launch a company with down the line? They don't even know that I might tag them that. But, because I have this incubator model, and I think that maybe we align in values. I know that they're looking to build something. Maybe they've just got out of something. So I might tag them with that. Maybe they're good for certain dinner conversations as well. Maybe they're interested in e-commerce or crypto or things like that. So if I'm running a dinner on a specific topic, they're tagged, their location. And then the other thing I do is like I have a numbering system, which is just like kind of the frequency in which, like kind of where our relationship is at. So like if we've gotten quite close, we're ones. If we're like on the precipice of being close, we're like 1.5, but they might slip into 2. 2 is kind of like I still see you one-on-one, but less frequently. I have more capacity for more 2s. 3 is like you're at my house parties, but we haven't kind of crossed over into that next barrier. 4 is an introduction that I haven't connected with yet. And 5 is someone that we've just lost connection with over time. And so that helps me also just kind of go, cool, I need to hit up some 2s, like, or whatever it is, like I want to see like who can graduate into like a 1. Because ideally, I guess I also think like you probably want 15 1s, 52s, 153s. I think that's like rough, like for me as like an extroverted person, maybe that plus or minus 5 is kind of what people want. And like moving into a new city, it's kind of like you want to have that, you want to have enough new ideas and interesting people, but people that you feel really comfortable with, and then the broadest perspective of people that you like, but maybe don't see as much one-on-one. Yeah.
It's interesting. And there's a finite capacity for how many you can have of each one. So it's interesting to see, do people ever move up and then move back based on relationships? And
yeah,
it's like an ever-changing inflow scoring system.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also like we're at different stages of life. Like if sometimes, I think Tim Ferriss said like you connect over people with shared goals and shared problems. And sometimes you have incredibly high alignment on those two things, and sometimes you don't. And so, if someone's just had a kid and, and they're, I don't know, they've moved to an hour away, maybe we're not going to see each other as frequently. But then maybe in a year I'll have a kid and be, in the area, and then we're, back to seeing each other every week or whatever it is.
Is the last contacted piece something you update manually, or does that pull from email and phone?
Manually. Yeah, I feel like to set up the pooling and to get that correct was like more effort than to just like every 2 months just do it manually.
Coming back to digital marketing for a second, and now with you moving into a founder role again and launching additional companies, what do you see are the current trends or strategies that are working presently?
In marketing?
In marketing.
Well, like one general theme that a lot of my companies have been exploring is with Megaphone, we do paid marketing. So we did like paid search, paid social, and different things around that. And one thing that I really feel is if you can nail, and it's a very hard thing to nail, is content. It's like so valuable and it compounds so beautifully, and it's defensible and it's building stronger relationships, and it's harder to compete with. One thing that I've felt with past businesses, the bigger that we got, the more people started competing with us. And it's funny, like the first piece of advice that I gave you when it came to marketing is like, look at what the competition is doing and replicate it. That's just what people do. Like that's just like you spend millions of dollars solving this thing and then everyone's copying you. And what I like about content in general is it's more defensible. If you build trust over time, you build relationships with people, through just showing up consistently and people understanding your personality. So it's not right for every business at every stage. And I still love paid, and I still think at the end of the day, every channel works. Like if you can get in front of someone and you have something valuable to say, it works. And they're all nuanced and challenging to solve in their own way. Whether you're doing outbound or cold calling or running events or SEO or whatever, everything works. So I less think about trends and more think about just like, where would I want to be as a company? But if I could, for example, if I could go back at Megaphone used to spend a lot of money on Facebook ads and Google, and we didn't do that much on content, and we tried a little bit, but if I could have done more on content in general and done more to position us as like an expert through thought leadership content at a higher velocity, I think that would have been more defensible and harder for other agencies to compete with, and give us more of a foothold. So it's just something in general that I think about.
Do you see that as also, that is more of a long-term strategy as well?
Yeah. I used to kind of do a graph where it's like, the bigger your company comes, the more the content marketing should be, like your allocation of marketing should go into content, and the less it should go into like short-term driven results. Because the good thing with paid ads or outbound or whatever it is you can get results tomorrow, whereas content tends to be slower unless you're an absolute superstar at it. Yeah.
So how would you, I guess on one side, branding would be the more creating content. How do you view direct response then? Is that more of just like short-term marketing and then they're inversely correlated with the size of the company?
To some degree, but like you can still, direct response can still have brand, and, some content can have short-term response or short-term goals as well. So like, but, to some degree, it's, if I'm launching a company off the ground, I'm just like, how do I get sales in the door as fast as possible? And then once we're feeling more established, how do I build a machine where it will get cheaper and cheaper over time? Typically with ads, your cost to acquire a customer rises over time. And with content, it actually can decrease over time. So that's, a cool thing, but it tends to start higher and yeah.
Yeah. So you're in the process right now of launching 3, potentially 4 new companies. How much or how important is defensibility in the creation process to you when selecting what you're doing next?
Question. The way that I get defensibility now is in more obscure ways. So like it's like defensibility from the start. So I think like the longer I'll zoom out a little bit and then zoom in. I think the longer that I've been an entrepreneur, the more I think about entrepreneurship with the intersection on investing and thinking about like a macro lens and thinking about how to set up a business where even if it was run poorly, it would still succeed, and then run it well. So like, how can I set up every little element to be successful. So an example is one of my agencies, where it's like a YouTube strategy agency, partnered with the guy that started Jubilee. He's got 5 billion views. He has got 12 million subscribers for channels that he's directly been involved with. He has consulted for Netflix, ran their content strategy, got them to 6.5 million subscribers, Emmy nominated. He worked with a bunch of different individuals, Starter Story, Matt Gray, things like that. All of their most viral videos came when he was working with them. And he's incredibly well networked in the YouTube space. That's going to be hard to compete with. Like I know all of the YouTube experts out there, and I think like Ryan is arguably the best. So that's like defensibility from day one, because no one can kind of compete with him. And then I've got my experience with scaling agencies. So together we can create something that it's going to be very challenging to compete with. So I don't have to stress as much about like people copying our ads, because it just wouldn't make sense, because we're talking about our unique experience.
And it's interesting too, you using him as an example, he's used content to build his own brand in a way. And because of that, there's built-in defensibility from a long-term perspective.
True. But the other component is his experience is so unique. And so that's another thing that I look for as well. Another company that I'm looking at launching, he was the number one sales guy at 2 companies that are known companies. And of like a 20 people, he was the number one guy. So again, like there's a lot of salespeople out there, and he doesn't necessarily have a big brand, but there's a story around the fact that, this team of 20, number one, this team of 30, number one, like, and now you're getting access to him. Like that's unique as well.
So you're looking for unique perspectives of ways that you can leverage your experience while partnering with someone else.
That's one of many ways that I could do this. But like, I'm looking for advantages right off the gate. It could be I'm working with someone that has a good lead gen strategy. That's it. But I want to know that it's like a really unique strategy that we've developed or you've developed, that then I can go in and supercharge all the other components. So it doesn't have to be this. It could be working with someone famous. It could be, I explored at speaking to a toxicologist. They created a microplastics test that he's got a patent pending for a blood test for analyzing microplastics in your blood. Currently, it's done through urine. Urine, he believes, is less effective because that's what you're releasing, whereas blood's showing you what you're retaining. And the data can influence, basically, they're now showing studies that it's found in like the testicles and the brain, and it's cancerous. And basically, there's a lot of studies saying that plastics is really bad. And so this test will show you where you're truly at with how your plastic minimization is going. And then you can retest it in 6 months. Anyway, so that's a really interesting concept. Like, if you've got the patent for that, then maybe this is a company that I want to start. But again, it's like, that's defensibility from day one.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to look at it too, because it's almost like the bullet holes in the fighter jets in World War II. The ones that made it back, they were reinforcing the places where the bullet holes were, not where they weren't. But the ones where they weren't was the planes that went down.
Yeah,
so they were looking in urine, but that's what's being excreted rather than being what's retained. Fascinating.
Totally.
Why do you choose to partner rather than educate yourself and do it yourself?
Well, I was the CEO for Megaphone for many years, and basically, like, the way that I am as a person, I quickly moved down to running that company in 3 days a week, then 2 days and 1 day. Then I trained a person to be CEO. I love coaching. Like, I love, basically, I'll spend all day doing courses, reading books, hanging out with entrepreneurs, and then I'll come in for like 2 hours and be like on the money, and I'm happy to speak to providers all day and take calls, like solving problems. And I don't mind being the CEO. I think like there'll be potential, I think high likelihood I'll be a CEO sometime soon. And yeah, I would just need a lot to align for me to like want to be the CEO of a company for like a 7 to 10 year sprint. And until then, I think there's people that are like currently very motivated to do it. And then our relationship works really well, where I'm like co-CEO. I can help make every decision, but I just don't need to be like daily stand-ups and, and et cetera, some of the stuff that, they get more energy out of than me.
Yeah, your strength is on the visionary side rather than the operations, even though the systems and processes are something that you thrive in.
Yeah.
Walk me through what that decreasing from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 process looks like, and how do you think about creating and integrating systems in order to make things more efficient?
I think, so I was training my second employee to be CEO, right? So it was like something that I decided right from the start with Megaphone. He ended up leaving when we got to about 20 and started his own company, which coincidentally got to roughly the same size that we left at. So he took over those lessons and successfully became a CEO. And then my fourth employee was the next person that I was training to be kind of like second in charge. Then I pivoted her to being CEO. And I would run a meeting, and then I would say, hey, hang back. I'd be like, see how I did this? See how I acknowledge this? I'm like, cool, I'm going to do it again. And then next week you're going to try to do it. And then she would do it. And then I'd say, hey, change this. And then I would go, okay, cool. You need to read this book. You need to read this book, summarize it. We're going to work through it. So it was really like a 3-year slow release of, okay, cool. I feel confident that this area is understood. And it was, it was amazing how, I heard her interviewed once on a podcast, and she was like saying the exact things that, like sometimes to a question, word for word, exactly what I would say. So like, we had kind of worked closely enough together that we had kind of merged on a lot of these ideas. I was 3 days in the office, I think honestly right from the start, but just partially just because, I don't know, I'm not that much of an office guy. Like it's just like 3 days felt right. And then I went to 2. I was super nervous thinking, okay, everyone's going to freak out. Like, and I was like, hey guys, just letting you know I'm going to have to shit. I was like, fine. No one cared at all. I think like the other thing that I did was I led in a way where people didn't really understand what I was doing. So I would be kind of light touching all the leaders, just kind of helping them think through problems. But as the team got bigger and bigger, people were unaware if I was ever doing work, or that I eventually became the eccentric founder guy that's like always meeting entrepreneurs and seems smart, but I don't really know what he's up to. And so I didn't feel like a crucial part of the business to the average team. And so long as like the leadership team was still supported by me up until the point where they felt confident to run things more and more, then that was kind of the process.
Was that an intentional strategy, or was that something that kind of evolved over time?
Intentional. Yeah, I think I like at the company, some rules that I kind of live by, whether or not they were helpful or not, was I tried to avoid becoming friends with the team. The reason is I didn't really want people to understand what I was doing with my time. And I really wanted like the business to succeed, and it was like professional. Everyone else in the team became like best friends. Like they would like party together. We were a very like social company. Like our culture, we had like raves, like every 6 months. We flew the team to Bali. We had like a cinema and a gym and everything in our office. So it was a very social company, which I wanted because I wanted people to be super happy there. I want to spend time at the office. But I was always friendly and chatty to everyone, but I would never really hang out with them outside of work. I think I was very conscious of how I positioned myself to everyone. Like I wanted people to think that I was like super smart and had the answers to everything, and had connections to everyone, that like was not necessary, So I was always reflecting on how I can solve that so that if I'm not around, no one cares.
It's interesting too. It's almost like you couldn't enjoy the fruits of your labor with what you had built because you wanted to take a step back, even though you are such a social and connective person.
It was interesting. Like I definitely still had friendships and relationships there, but they never like, I was always like tentative with them. But I had such a big social life outside of it. It didn't bother me.
What do you feel from a founding perspective, and maybe someone moving into the role of a CEO, what do you feel are the biggest things that someone would be doing wrong presently, or the common themes that you've seen with founders that they are doing wrong? Taking a quick break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was designed and created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. So if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone that you feel would get value as well. Now, fun fact, 90% of listeners of this show are not actually subscribed to the podcast. So if you would take a moment and go ahead and tap the subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now back to the show.
I mean, I think there's a series of common pitfalls that people tend to fall into. One of them that just because I'm launching agencies and I speak to other agency owners, a common one is they, whether this is wrong or right, it's up to their preferences, but they're a good operator. So let's say they're really good at a certain skill set. They're really good at YouTube ads, and they're known for that. They start picking up on clients. Maybe they raise their prices a little bit. They have one or two people that help them with the systems and operations. They get to $80K a month, which is, or $90K a month. They've got relatively low overheads, $10K. So they're making a really good living, $600-700K a year. They're working really hard. They're always kind of at the mercy of their clients. And they don't really know what to do from that point. It's a very specific problem to the agency thing. The e-commerce problems are different. Every business is different. But that specific one, there's kind of levels of the agency growth, and the first part is getting clients and and raising prices and sales and having a good enough service. But once you solve that and you're at that next level, then the next thing is hiring and outsourcing and delegating properly. And that just seems to be one that I'm observing a lot, just as I'm speaking to agency owners, where they're kind of stuck in that level and struggling to get past that. Yeah. I'll add one more. The other really big one is predictable lead generation, where they're relying on referrals or just kind of fingers crossed, hopefully we'll get enough leads this month. And every company needs to build a very predictable lead generation thing where they know they put money in the machine and money comes out, and they know exactly all components of the funnel so that they can kind of scale a bit more predictably.
Talk to me a little bit deeper about that. There's two sides here. There's the data-driven analytical side, and then there's this, from a marketing perspective, a creative idea iteration side. How much do you allow data to dictate the creative, and how much does creative dictate the data?
When you're coming up with an ad strategy?
When you're coming up with an ad strategy, or when you're looking to build out, say, a lead generation system?
So I think when I'm thinking about creative and data, specifically aligns to highly creative marketing components. So things like Facebook ads or social media ads, or if you're doing a YouTube strategy, that's highly creative. And so, some people have a framework where you do 80% very data-driven decisions or experiments, and then 20% is kind of highly creative out of the box. Maybe the data doesn't support it, but you might find an outlier that scales up. But with other channels, I think in general, your marketing is very data-driven. And so, you're doing the research and then you're figuring out campaigns to run. Maybe that's just the overall arching thing to that question, where it's the majority of what you're doing is things that have already worked for other people, and you're doing your slight variations on it. And then there's a minority allocation of big experiments to see how they're going to perform.
I have a couple other questions for you, but they're down a tangential path. What is a question or something about marketing that I don't know I should, or a question I should be asking that I'm not?
I think you've asked some good ones. I think it's hard because my marketing hat changes. If I'm speaking to a dog food company, the hat that I wear is very different to selling $100,000 a month marketing service. You know what I mean? But one general thing is like the offer and the positioning, and you know, that kind of holds true. And it's one of those things that, again, like the longer I've been entrepreneur, the more I think about that, where I'll speak to an agency owner and they're selling their service for $3K a month or $4K a month. And I'll be like, okay, here's how we reposition you that you're now $9K a month, you know what I mean? $10K a month. And like, I understand like the price sensitivity of the market. Like, you know, I've done the research. I know that you can be charging double your rates, but right now your positioning and your sales process doesn't allow for that. And then, you know, with the dog food company, again, it's like doing all the research, figuring out, you know, doing the market research of specific customers, doing like price sensitivity analysis, and then trying to understand like what is your unique positioning and how does your price and positioning match. And, you know, there's so many just like, there's infinite angles of marketing that, you know, that was just one that came to mind.
Talk to me now a bit about AI. How important is AI in this creative, iterative process, and how important is it to these new companies that you're founding?
So by the time I sold Megaphone, we were using very little AI. I think partially, I was kind of out of the day-to-day operations for a while when we sold it. But we actually sold to an AI company that, you know, has raised over $100 million, and they're a tool to help marketing companies or brands use AI to like scale creative campaigns. And so it spins different copy and images as well. And then it also looks at your like media buying and helps use AI to adjust it. So, you know, I'm a big believer that these things will be very powerful. Whether or not they are today and whether or not they're necessary today, I'm not sure, particularly if you're a smaller spender, maybe bigger spenders more so. And then in terms of the new companies, I mean, one company is being built around AI. I think like general themes that I think about is like, one is, you know, what is the probability that there'll be a tool that can replicate your entire service, you know, in 2 or 3 years? And if the answer, if there's already a tool that can do it like 20% as good or 30% as good, then that's probably a signal that in a couple of years it's probably going to be doing it 80 or 90% as good. So that's a red flag. So I'd prefer to be like building companies that AI is only going to make the service more valuable, as opposed to less valuable. I do think, you know, with the YouTube strategy agency, for example, like there's tools that do script writing, there's tools that do ideation. You know, the idea is just so important, that I still think it's going to be a long time, if ever, that they're going to outperform, you know, the team. And even if the idea tools are really good, they're just still going to create too many, and it's going to just be someone that just has a really good sense, and the volume of little decisions that need to be made over a period of time. So it can be supplementary and additive to like source more ideas, but then like you're still going to need those really skilled people, particularly at like the level that we're targeting. But yeah, overall, very, very interested in AI, always looking at new tools, always kind of just challenging how we're doing things, figuring out, you know, if it continues at this trajectory, what might it look like? And then, you know, keeping my eye on where we're at.
So you think it's more about people in the future who are going to be able to leverage the AI tools to their full capacity than the AI tools themselves? In terms of creating defensibility from in a vertical that may get taken over by AI completely?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, in YouTube, there's a cartoon that's all AI generated cartoons, a YouTube channel with like over 1 million subscribers. And so the fact that exists in cartoon, one day the same thing will exist with real people. I actually saw like a sitcom that was, the images were generated in Midjourney and then it was animated in Runway ML or something like that. And so it was like, and then there's another tool that matches the text to voice, and there's another tool that does the sound effects and music and voice generation. So basically you're getting, and the script was all written by AI as well. So you're getting a full 4-minute sitcom, you know, with jokes and punchlines and sound effects, AI generated. So it's still like pretty crappy today, but like it's so clear that eventually infinite amount of content can be generated with AI. And so there's some people that will generate it. But so I think like the way that I think about it is keep a tab on it. And for certain brands like that we might work with, they might go, hey, that's a really good fit for what we're doing. We're interested in cartoons. We're a volume play. We just want to get out a lot of like interesting content. And so we can be on the cutting edge of that and work with it. And there's other brands that they want to do a less is more, super high quality. And the AI is going to empower us for like ideation or editing where we can do things cheaper and we can kind of fulfill at a higher quality. So yeah, I think, I think it can go both ways is kind of the point. And so, but I do think like to offer a valuable service, you just want to be on the cutting edge of it.
What are some of the things that you believe AI will never replace?
I mean, like one business that I'm looking at starting is a physical event company, kind of like a competitor to Spartan Race. AI can't replace that. So, there's like home services or, I would say like something like pool cleaning. I just saw like this AI robot that like cleans your pool. So it's hard to fully predict, but there's things like community events, physical things, all those things, I've been looking into like the Optimus robot and there's another one, Configure, which is also really cool. Every now and then I'll just go on like a multi-hour Elon, Mark Zuckerberg binge, just like hear what they're thinking. And, Elon was saying that he thinks there'll be 2 humanoid robots for every human within like 10 years. He thinks that Grok, his company that's doing AI, will solve AGI in 2026. And he said by the end of this year, he's going to have the most powerful AI system. But if you look at Optimus and the robot and like what that can do and the interactivity and things like that, there's not a lot that AI can't do is kind of the end answer of that. I say like these physical things, but like even like home services and components like that, like, it could be your electrician, theoretically, not for a while. But I do think like community, at taste.
The things that make us uniquely human.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm one of those people that I could totally see AI kind of being better than humans in almost everything, to the point that life becomes more about choosing what we want to do with it and less about like work and we find meaning in other ways.
Yeah, I saw. Speaking about AI, I saw like the world's first AI supermodel doing like $300,000-$400,000 a month right now, being licensed as likeness to brands.
Yeah.
What was her name? Emily Pellegrini or something.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's fascinating. But Max, this has been a pleasure. I sincerely appreciate you coming on. The last piece I kind of want to dive into that I find really fascinating is your monthly challenge. First off, explain what it is, where did it start, and where are you at presently?
So for 3 years, I did a monthly challenge where I learn a skill that's like somewhat hard to master, and I give it my all for 1 month with like an end goal in mind, and then I'd film the process and put it on YouTube. So I did things like violin, backflip, salsa dancing, learn Spanish, and I did it because for one, I had like gotten myself out of the operations of Megaphone, and I had a lot of free time, and I love learning things. It's just kind of been a passion, lifelong passion. I've always kind of wanted to learn more things. It was kind of a crazy journey. It takes a lot of time to like, there's the actual learning time, and then there's finding the right teachers and driving around. If I'm doing salsa dancing, like finding the best teacher, driving to, the salsa class 20, 30 minutes away and doing that like 3 times a week for 2 hours. And then setting up my cameras, getting the batteries ready. And then I was doing all the editing for the first 18 months as well. So it was a very like time consuming thing. An edit would take like 15 hours or something like that. So I just locked myself in a room, go through like 30, 40 hours of footage, piece together a storyline, taught myself editing in that process as well. And then I'd have to like wrap up a 30-day challenge in like 25, 26 days so that I could edit it, post it, and then start getting ready on the next one. And, it was just like always on next thing. So every now and then I'd do like a challenge where it'd be like 30 days of meditation or something just to like chill out because it was like a lot. But yeah, it was awesome. I got to work with like a lot of really good teachers. Like my singing teacher was the same singing teacher that taught Selena Gomez and John Mayer. It took me to like some interesting experiences and places and appreciation of different skills and subcultures that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
What was the favorite thing that you learned?
Well, I really like skateboarding because when I was like 12, I really loved skateboarding. I thought it was cool. Tried it. Was pretty bad. And then kind of that was the end of my skateboarding career. And then to re-pick it up, the goal was to learn to ollie, grind, kickflip, and drop in all in a month. And I got almost all of it except for the grind. And that was just really satisfying. Just like something that I've always wanted to do.
What did the system that you distilled to learn best look like?
Key thing is find the right mentor very quickly. And the other thing is, there's kind of, in learning a new skill, there's repeating the same thing that you already know. And then there's kind of like the right level of discomfort where it's like, if it's too hard, then you're not learning anything because it's too complex. If it's too easy, then you're not learning anything because you're just reiterating the things that you already know. And so the goal is like sustained effort, choosing the right thing to be working on for the right amount, for the longest period of time. And the longer you can stay in that period of time, then the faster you'll grow. And so like with learning Spanish, having really good mentors, they told me about, what's his name? Michelle Thomas and Anki and all these like very specific things for language learning, which is really good. But then if I'm learning something like piano, it's like, I don't just jump straight into the right hand and left hand at tempo. I go like slow, I just do the right hand and I'm just doing that until I've got it down. And then I add in more complexity slowly over time. But I don't just keep repeating the part that I've already learned because that's where you can be tempted and slow yourself down.
How much did books play a role in the learning process?
I don't think I ever used a book for one of the challenges.
What does you talked a little bit about summarizing and distilling information from a book. Walk me through your system for that.
Just in general? I wouldn't say like I have a particularly evolved system. I listen to books, back in the day it was like 2x speed, now it's like 1.3 speed. And
you're getting slower.
Exactly, I'm getting slower over time. I would just, back in the day I'd have a target of 30 books a year. So it would just force me to read more books. And then I would try to just implement ideas. I'd try to find things that were very applicable to something that I was thinking about right then and then try to apply it straight away. And yeah.
What's your most gifted book?
Pillars of Self-Esteem.
By
Nathaniel Brandon.
Okay.
Yeah. The other one is The Fountainhead, and I've got the cover on my ankle.
The
Fountainhead.
I haven't heard of that.
By Ayn Rand.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Final two questions for you. You spoke a little bit about Spanish there. What were the two pieces that you said that you learned early on that was a game changer for you?
What
Michelle Thomas and...
and so Michelle Thomas is... do you know Michelle Thomas?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically some Swiss guy that his claim was like, I teach languages to the stars. And like a lot of famous celebrities, when they're learning a language, he would be like the person that can teach them to get conversational as fast as possible. He worked with all of like the biggest stars of like the 60s and 70s. But basically he developed a system where you just listen and talk through while like the audio is playing. And a lot of like language like learning experts they say that this is the fastest way to get conversational. And it was really effective. And then every time you write down, if you learn new words, you add it to a spaced repetition system software. So I use something called Anki. And so you're constantly updating your vocabulary. So you do, like, let's say an hour and a half of Michelle Thomas, and then you do 30 minutes of flashcards on Anki. And then once you have a base level. Once you've done about 15 to 20 hours of that, then you can start to have basic conversation. Then you start to include about 30 minutes of conversation every other day. And every time you want to say something or you hear something new, you add it to your SRS system. And then eventually you'll finish Michelle Thomas, and then you'll just start to move just to conversation and SRS. And if you do that for like 90 to 100 hours, you'll be conversational.
It's fascinating. I'm presently learning Spanish. That's the reason I asked to expand upon that. Well, Max, I sincerely appreciate your time. Final question for you in line with the name of the podcast. What input of yours specific to marketing has provided the best return for you over time?
Input. I guess I'll say online courses, if that answers the question. I just think, learning and just being like, one of the principles that I had for Megaphone was no one will outlearn me. And I honestly believe that probably no one in Australia did more courses than me on marketing for the period while I was running Megaphone. And with that in mind, I could speak to any client and just know more than any other person that was speaking to them. Maybe I wasn't the best. Maybe I didn't have that best natural ability at a lot of the things, but at least I had like the awareness of what everyone was doing, and that was like an advantage.
Max, thank you.
Pleasure.